Good afternoon or evening. I guess evening. Good evening. It's Full Stack Online, November 2020. We're trying the experiment some more. We're trying to figure out what's going on here. Trying to get some good things out for you guys, even though we can't be together in person. So I'm hoping that you guys find this useful and helpful. And tonight, I'm super excited. Last month we had Richard Clayton on, and he went over drawing diagrams for development purposes, and that was super helpful. And in fact, on the Slack, our community Slack, after his talk, I was trying to work through this React issue where I had like all these different states I was trying to keep in my head at once, and I knew it couldn't have been that complicated. I just could not figure out how to just keep it all in my head. So I was like, Richard, what was that tool you suggested we use? And he led me to it, and I made my own little diagram, and it helped out immensely when I was trying to think through this React component, which ended up, like I thought, not being all that complex, but that diagram really simplified it for me. So I really appreciated that. So I'm hoping if you guys have not seen that from last month, go back and look at that. That's on our YouTube channel. So you'll probably get some good use out of that, or some good information out of there. So, but one of the things that we did at the end of that was we stuck around for a while, and we answered questions from the audience on YouTube. And there were some really good questions about the diagrams and ways that that Richard uses those at his work. But there were also some more general questions that I thought were excellent questions to be asking. And I figured there's got to be more people out there who attend Full Stack, or either may have heard about Full Stack, that are interested in these questions as well. So I thought, what if we had a panel of people that just came on and answered questions? And so if you're just getting started in tech, if you're thinking about getting started in tech, even if you're, if you've been in tech for 60 years and you invented algorithms and all that kind of stuff, there's probably something that you can learn here, ask questions. We all have different experiences, so this is a time to ask that. So if you are on YouTube watching this and you're live, you should see a chat over on the side, and feel free to, in the chat, put any questions you have for our panelists, which I'm going to introduce here in a minute. And I'll see those questions. I'll be able to introduce those to the panelists as we go on. And I've been collecting some questions over the past month or so. And so if nobody asks a single question, I still have things that we can discuss with our panelists. So that's good. I've come slightly prepared. We'll see how prepared it actually is. But before we go any further, I want to bring our panelists on. So, and again, this is an experiment, so I'm trying out the software. I'm going to add these people to our stream here one at a time. And there we go. Here's our panelists. We are all here. Welcome, guys.
Hello, welcome.
Yeah.
Hello.
So I think the first thing I want to do is have each of you go through and kind of introduce yourself, what got you started in tech, and maybe a little bit of your journey. We don't need the full story, but a little bit of the journey between when you got started, or when you maybe even first became interested, to how you got started, to where you are today, and maybe where you're looking to go in the future. So let's go kind of like we're at Brady Bunch order here. Let's go clockwise. So from me on my screen, I think it's probably the same for you guys. Leanne is up next. So Leanne, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Leanne Werner. I am a JavaScript and ServiceNow developer at a company called NewRocket, which is a ServiceNow partner. I got started in tech about 3 years ago because I was dating this guy who was a developer, and I couldn't understand a word he was saying. So I figured I should try to learn some of this lingo, and turned out I really loved it, and I knew if he could do it, I could definitely do it. So been a developer ever since.
That's awesome. All right, James, you're up.
Yeah, my name's James. I'm a developer. I started as a developer at Planning Center, always a developer at heart. I work on our platform team now, primarily doing infrastructure things, and specifically on AWS.
Did you say you started your development career at Planning Center?
I did. I started on our services team in 2014, and slowly over time, I mean, I still write code every day, but not working for a particular product team anymore. Working mostly writing automation tools and internal tooling to make our developers' lives a little bit easier.
Awesome. And that's one thing I appreciate about the people on this panel, is we all kind of have a little bit of different backgrounds and expertises I don't know if that's the correct pluralization of expertise, but we can each bring a different perspective on any issues you may have, any questions you have about a tech stack or anything like that. So James is kind of our DevOps guy, he's our server guy on the panel tonight, which I totally appreciate. All right, Katie.
Hello, my name is Katie. I also work at Planning Center. I got started, I accidentally took the wrong class in high school. I thought it was more like a Photoshop class for MySpace pictures, and turned out it was not. And I ended up really liking it, so I stuck with it. And yeah, I started working at Planning Center about 3.5 years ago. Snuck my way in, and I've been super happy ever since.
Yeah, it's hilarious. I did not know that about the high school thing. That's really funny. All right, Richard.
Hey everybody, Richard Clayton. I'm a principal software engineer at Peachjar, which is flyers for schools. I've been programming since 1999, so quite a long time. Professionally, started actually in the Marine Corps, and when I got out of the Marine Corps, I did government contracting, and then I rode 3 startups into the ground as they failed financially, and now I am hoping to get this final startup to actually succeed. So lots of experience. I run the gamut on infrastructure and coding and everything. So
That's awesome. I actually may have, that brings up a question I may write down for you about those failed startups, but we'll get to that a little bit later. All right, Ryan.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ryan Causey. Currently, I think the crazy title they gave me was Senior Lead Full Stack Software Engineer at Petco. Yes, I think that was just the recruiter, adding some seasoning on top. But anyways, started kind of my software career, the generic, oh, hey, I love video games. How do you make video games? That's computer software. And just kind of fell in love with, software in general, and kind of opened my eyes in college that there was more. Graduated 2013, started as a DoD contractor with Northrop Grumman, working on like embedded systems, so like the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, stuff like that. And then kind of through, self-learning and other things, got into web development, and through kind of my personal projects, that's how I was able to end up at Petco. So it's been an interesting transition.
I imagine, were you able to carry much from F-35s to Petco?
I mean, the biggest thing I think I got from that is when you're, because it's obviously safety critical, right? If something messes up, the plane crashes and everybody dies. So you kind of learn a respect for good designs, lots of testing, thinking through edge cases, those kinds of things. So you will be surprised at how much there was of learning what not to do.
That's kind of scary, but I imagine. So out of us, maybe just raise your hand or say here, who has experience in JavaScript? Okay, cool. And then more like Ruby. Yeah, PHP. Any of the Windows type languages like .NET? All right. C. Okay. Any others, major ones I'm missing?
Python.
Python, yeah. I've looked at Python.
Go, baby.
Go. Yeah.
Goes pretty good.
Elixir.
Elixir? Oh, wrong way.
Oh. Elixir.
Where's Geo?
Yeah, there I am. I'm
Nice.
yeah, that's just weird to point at the wrong direction on the camera. Yeah, Elixir for me. Okay, cool. So that gives, I guess me. I'm Jeffrey Lessel, go by Geo a lot of times. I liked computer games growing up and liked breaking the operating system while I was trying to figure out DOS and trying to get games to work. Started coding with, those books, if you're old as I am, that came with books, and there's like basic in the books, and you copied from the book to the basic editor, and then you ran your game, and that's how you got new games. So from there, I went to college. Actually, my major is in music business. So I wanted to be a studio audio engineer and producer. But all my life, I've always been doing tech stuff on the side. So even in college, I'm making websites and stuff like that. Got married early while in college and decided that working in a studio and being married didn't really jive very well because the studio hours were crazy and it was all union. So you had to work certain hours or the time slots were certain hours in Nashville. So got a job doing like Gopher stuff at a web, web hosting company. We ended up doing like domain name registration as well eventually, but was hired to cut down tables, the legs on tables, and go to Home Depot and then bring them back, reassemble the tables, and there you go. I'm not talking about database tables. I'm talking about like desk tables. So from there, I taught myself PHP because that's what their servers ran, and from there have basically been in tech full time in one way or another. And then got hired at Planning Center 2015, I guess it was. No, 2014, and just celebrated my 6th year anniversary, which was awesome, and love it here. And you'll notice that 3 out of the 6 of us here work at Planning Center. Full Stack is kind of a Planning Center creation. We don't necessarily belong to Planning Center, but it kind of came out of Planning Center people. And Leanne is now married to a Planning Center person. So some of this may be Planning Center specific, but hopefully we'll try to keep it as general as possible. Anyway, so thank you for those introductions. One thing I do want to ask is, when you first became interested in tech, how did you go about learning? Did you go to a school? Did you take a course? Did you read a book? What was the thing that, 1 or 2 things that you found were the most helpful for you as you were getting going in tech? I was going to open that up, whoever wants to take it.
Personally, I went to an online, I did Treehouse, mainly because I had just graduated college and I could not pay for any more education. And it was really approachable, easy, cheap, and it gave me a really good foundation.
For me, it was the O'Reilly Programming Perl book that kind of slaps a date on me, but
yeah, man.
I'm embarrassed to say Sam's learned PHP in 24 hours.
Yes.
Perfect.
And it took me like 2 months. So.
But I only spent 24 hours in those 2 months, right?
Yeah, I think it was more than 24 hours. I can't read a chapter in 1 hour. So yeah.
Oh man, yeah, that would be difficult. Katie, Ryan?
Mine was head first into Java because learning programming in high school or any class is difficult. And so, yeah, I was like, well, I need to read a book. And it was head first into Java.
Yeah, for me, it was, traditional college route. Started in community college, taking programming classes. But I will say, when trying to transition from like the C, C++ embedded stuff, I did jump on the How to Learn Python the Hard Way book to get into another language like that. And I found that really useful.
Yeah, nice. For me, it was O'Reilly books mainly. This was early 2000s. And then 2000, what was it, 5 or so, I learned about Ruby and Rails and saw the How to Create a Blog in 15 Minutes video. And was like, I'm never writing another line of PHP if I can help it. So I've been writing Rails since then, more or less, or in more or less amounts. But the person who really got me into Ruby was Dave Thomas with his Ruby Pickaxe book. And I would just read that. I read that from like cover to cover. It's mostly just like a reference book or something, but like I read it and it was amazing. Learned so much stuff from it. And when he actually moved, tweeted out something, I followed him, and he mentioned something about this new language called Elixir. And so I was like, oh, if Dave Thomas likes Elixir, then I'm going to go check out what Elixir is. And bought his book a little bit later when he was writing one and have fell in love with Elixir since then. So I'm kind of following Dave Thomas around. So whatever he jumps to next, I'm in a dangerous position to follow. I will say that for us, it seems a lot of us use books, and I went to a class or a school, but there are a lot of online resources now that are free or even pay courses. Have any of you come across any courses online or even just a random video on YouTube that have helped you or you think maybe have helped to someone who's just getting started?
On the infrastructure side of things, there's a site called A Cloud Guru, A Cloud Guru. Um, they focus on certifications, but if you are targeting a particular thing, they might actually have language stuff too. I've only looked at it from a certification perspective, but they'll let you go the AWS route, the Google route, and their videos are concise, and the course is streamlined to help you get the full picture as quick as possible. It's been pretty great.
That's cool. For me, I know that there's a lot of people who have recommended Wes Bos. Is that how you say his name? BOS, for JavaScript stuff. And I know that's a resource I've seen thrown around a lot. For me, I found this course on Udemy for JavaScript stuff. I was trying to teach my son JavaScript and get him into it because he's interested in coding stuff for games, I thought the guy did a really good job. He's covered everything in JavaScript. And if I find it, I'll try to put the link in the comments or something if you're interested in JavaScript. But I found his course very well done on YouTube.
How old is your son?
He is 13, and he goes in and out of interest in JavaScript. He for a while he did Roblox stuff, so he's looking at Lua. And then I was like, man, Lua's okay, but I think mostly it was me hoping he would do JavaScript just because I could help him out because I don't really know much Lua. And he could do a lot of stuff in JavaScript and not just focus on Roblox. But I think I was more interested in it than he was. He went through it pretty good, but he's kind of lost interest a little bit. But every once in a while, I'll try to get him back into it.
Awesome.
There's also a book called Get Programming with Node.js by Jonathan Wexler. We just finished that book in my company's book club, and it was great. It walks you through a capstone project from very beginning, you don't know anything, to a pretty well featured Node application.
I'm going to get a little spicy here and say, first of all, Eddie's comment about eloquent JavaScript, absolutely true. It's a really great book. But I think the thing, if you're like coming from a different language and into JavaScript, I think JavaScript is a fairly simple language. And for me, I think when I mentor junior engineers or whatever, the thing that I struggle with is you can learn JavaScript pretty quickly, but you need to learn abstractions. You need to learn programming patterns and stuff like that. So I think that once you understand the language and you know when to use this, right? And in what context this means, right? Like you've mastered half the language. And I think you have to start to move on to, and this is invariably true for any language, you have to move on to the higher order stuff, the stuff that talks about, all right, now you understand the language, you're not mystified by it. Now, how do I program? Like really program? How do I design systems?
Yeah.
And there are a lot of great books on that. So if you need a recommendation, I'm more than happy to provide.
I'll take a recommendation on that.
My
I
favorite.
don't want to put you on the spot, but
Sure. I think everybody goes to Clean Code. Clean Code's definitely an excellent book. But for me, Principles, Patterns, and Practices, which is a Bob Martin book, Uncle Bob. He does it in C# and he does it in Java. It's a really excellent series. So I think that's my book that I give like juniors going into mid. Like, here you go. You need to start learning about, patterns and what it means to write good code. So
yeah, that's good. Speaking of book club, we have one at Planning Center with some of the developers, and we're going through the Pragmatic Programmer, which is an old book, like 20 years old, and we're going through the 20th anniversary edition. I think this is like the third revision they've gone through, and they've updated it with some more modern techniques and ideas. But it doesn't necessarily cover a single language. It does cover how to think about programming in a general sense. And I think that was a great one to start out with. If you're just trying to get your head around the idea of programming, and not necessarily how to declare a variable in a specific language, but what do I go from knowing how to declare that variable? Where do I go from there? I think Pragmatic Programmer is a good book for that. Any others come to mind?
A good one, I would say it's a little more on the beginner side, is the You Don't Know JS series by Kyle Simpson. That one's always a classic and good, really good.
Nice. If you're looking for Elixir books, I can recommend one for you. I won't plug it. Here's Eddie.
Oh, really? Tell us about it.
I wrote a book on Phoenix in action. Go read it if you're interested in Elixir and Phoenix. Eddie says, I'm in talks with a company that's looking to potentially hire me as a PHP dev. I need to build an app in PHP. Have never written a line of PHP. What are some good resources for PHP? Anybody have any good PHP resources?
I don't have books because I've been out of PHP for a long time, but I would look very heavily into Laravel. I was at my second to last startup that crashed and burned. They were a PHP shop, and we were migrating the code base out of, I don't even know what it was. It was some kind of like Symfony thing that they had invented. But then they went to Laravel, and Laravel, like coming from other backgrounds, like including Node and seeing Laravel, I was very impressed. So PHP can absolutely be abused. I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people don't like writing in it. But I think Laravel does a really good job at showing you how to write good PHP. So I would look at their docs, and that should give you a good sense of, what to do.
And for those not familiar with what Laravel is, can you describe a little bit about that?
It's a MVC framework. It's like a server framework for doing backend coding. It's got a lot of stuff included, like in that. It's like the Rails of PHP. Although PHP's got a lot of different frameworks, so you can't really just call it like the Rails. But it is probably the most popular MVC framework, and that's Model View Controller. It's like a way to do backend websites.
Eddie, I don't know your specific situation, but these days I would guess that people interested in full stack development are mostly coding for the web. But I think that brings up an interesting question, in that if you have a technology that you're looking to study, or in this case, being hired for PHP, do you spend more time at first learning the language itself or the framework that you're going to be coding in?
I'm going to leave it to someone else to talk.
Yeah, for me personally, the path I took, especially because when I started transitioning from embedded to web dev, I started with Python and Django. Django being a web framework written in Python, probably similar to the way Laravel works. I personally took the step of learning the language first, so I could understand kind of the core concepts. What does the syntax mean? What are kind of the common idioms used in the language? So that when I got into the framework, it was easier to figure out what's Python magic and what's framework magic, right? But that's my personal approach. Each person's different. I don't know that one way is better than the other.
I'm going to answer that from the hiring side of things. If you're coming in as a junior developer and all you've focused on, you've done the framework thing and you don't know the language, we're going to notice. That's going to come out during the interview process. So doing one without the other will be a struggle. And honestly, when we're interviewing a programmer, right? We're trying to find someone who knows how to learn, right? The fundamentals are harder to teach than the framework. So if you can show that you have the fundamentals of one or multiple languages in the bag, then you have a leg up on a lot of others.
Yeah, well said.
I'll just add one more thing. Go broad and then deep. So I think the thing that I noticed with a lot of people is that they don't understand what makes a language special. And so they get caught up in learning loops, but they don't understand that, like, hey, this framework or this language is really good because of these particular features. And these were the design goals of the language. And that really drives how the frameworks are written. And so if you don't really understand the language and why it's done a certain way, you won't understand the framework. And that's true of every language. So like Node, perfect example, because we all are familiar with it, right? If you don't understand that you've got one main thread and everything else is async IO threads, right? Like, you're not going to understand why it's bad to block that main thread and do a lot of work on it. And so like, that's just a trivial example, but I mean, like, that's true for PHP, right? What's the PHP's like model? Like it's whole server model that drives what the language looks like, or like what the frameworks look like. So go broad, get a basic understanding of every technology, right? Get a basic understanding of what the framework authors are trying to get to, and then go deep into the particular subject, and then learn about it. So
Yeah, I like that. I think along those lines, one of the things I did both when I learned Ruby and Rails and Elixir and Phoenix was Rails is the thing that got me interested in Ruby. And when I saw Rails, I was like, ooh, this is cool. I want to learn this. And then realized, okay, it's Ruby on Rails. So I may need to learn some Ruby. But I spent some time learning Rails because that was the thing that got me excited, to the point where I was like, I can make something, but I don't fully understand what I've made or why it works. And so then I would switch for a while to going deeper on Ruby. And then I would, learn a bunch of stuff in Ruby. And then I'd be like, okay, now I can use some of this stuff to make even something cooler in Rails. So I'd go back to Rails and do something cooler in Rails. And then I'd be like, okay, now if I want to do this next thing, I've really got to learn more Ruby. So I'd back down into Ruby. And I do think that going back and forth thing is helpful a lot of times, especially because if the thing that got you excited was the framework, or the thing that's going to get you hired is the framework, then you kind of want to be able to do something in it initially, and then dive deep. So again, that's the kind of the broad, do the framework thing first, and then go a little deeper and learn about those fundamentals that's building the foundation of that framework that you're learning, and then go back up to the framework and build cool things up there, and add a second story to your house, and then go back to the foundation and make it larger and more solid so you can do some more cool stuff to the house itself. Here's a question from Lanny. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. As a new tech lead, how do you approach and mentor intermediate devs? You know what? Let's save that. Let's save that for a little bit later. I do like that question, but we're kind of in the lines of a new dev, so people who are learning. So let me ask that from a different perspective. How do you find a job, and how do you get hired in this environment? I know that's a broad question, but maybe draw on your experience of how did you find your first job in tech? What did you have to do? What are some things you had to overcome? And any sort of suggestions you'd have for now?
As a junior, getting hired as a junior.
Yeah, let's start there.
I would definitely say having a portfolio site that showcases some of your works, even if it's something from a code school or a tutorial you did online. Anything is better than nothing. And if you don't have any job experience, a portfolio is all you have to lean on.
Actually, let me piggyback on that before someone else jumps in, because we actually had a question come in during the month that was talking about portfolio sites, and I'd love to get your thought on that, Leanne. The question was, how thorough / challenging / complete should the apps on my portfolio be to demonstrate mastery of full stack prior to applying to my first job?
I would say, from a front-end developer's perspective, show understanding in your basic CRUD functionality. Create, read, destroy, all of those need to be solid. But as far as complex architecture, state management, I don't really think that's vital for a junior developer.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, so back to getting hired. Anybody else have an opinion on that or something to add?
I do. If people don't want to jump in, one thing I see commonly for junior devs that I think is a huge mistake is chasing the technology of jobs that, you see a job and you're like, oh, it says PHP, I'm going to chase that, even though you've been focused primarily on Node. And I know that you said that, Eddie, I know that you're doing Node and then you're considering PHP. And this area, unfortunately, I think San Diego historically has been a PHP.NET hotbed. And so a lot of the jobs here are in those languages. But what I told a friend of mine who lost his job right when all the layoffs happened in March, I told him, do not chase technology. Go deep in one of them. Go extremely deep. And the reason why is once you really understand a language or you understand a technology, you unlock your understanding. You form this template in your brain of how languages work, and you can apply it to other languages, right? But you don't get that if you're just scratching the surface on a lot of languages. Go deep. Learn, just pick a stack of commonly used technologies and go deep on it. Node, Postgres, React. And that's all I'm going to focus on. Because I'll tell you what, as a person who's hired a lot of engineers in my day, I would rather take someone who's got a deep understanding of a particular set that maybe doesn't match my stack and train them on the piece that they don't know, instead of someone who's got a broad understanding but really no depth. So.
Yeah, I think that echoes something that James said earlier, in that we can teach a framework. Knowing how to think through a program or think through a whole stack is something else that has to be kind of learned through experience in some ways. But that experience doesn't necessarily have to be on the job experience. That could be through a school, or it could be through side projects.
Yeah, I can 100% agree with that sentiment, because I knew more about C++ templates than I ever wanted to. But just kind of being able to go that deep into a language, and you can kind of they call it like template metaprogramming. So it's kind of like a little language in the language. But being able to get that deep, kind of knowing how the internals of C++ work and all the craziness that's there, really led to, when I looked at something like Python or JavaScript or another language, it's like, oh, I see the similar patterns. You can kind of do some pattern matching and go, I've been here before, okay. And it's a lot easier to kind of go through and pick up what are the idioms of that language, what are the specific things it's good at. So you'll find that it's a lot easier to ramp, like Rich said, on something new once you've gone deep on another technology stack, because the patterns that fall out of it, at least to me, seem fairly similar.
Yeah. Katie, can I brag on you for a minute? First of all, do you want to go through
Sure.
Your experience in getting hired at Planning Center? From
How
your
I snuck
perspective?
in?
Yeah.
So I first applied in November of like 2016, and they were like, thanks, but no thanks. You're good. And so I was like, okay. And I continued. I was doing a boot camp at the time. I also had an associate's degree in computer science. So I had a little bit of background with most everything. And around February, James actually emailed me, and he's like, hey, remember that time we said no about that? Do you maybe want to do like a possible internship? I don't know how long it's going to be. I don't know like how much we're going to pay you. But like, maybe do you want to try? I'm like, I will pay you to let me work there. I love it. Don't tell Spillman that. But I get to the interview, and we start doing, I think, did we do the form first?
I can't remember which thing we did first. It was something that was very entry level.
I think we did the form first. So they asked me to make a blog. I think that was the first one, and I got through that really, really smoothly until the end. And I couldn't remember that I needed to write save to save it, and finally got over that hump. And Gio and James both looked at each other and they go, well, like, we have enough time. Let's do another one. And I said, oh, dear Lord, no. But okay, I love this. And we did the next one. And that one was more challenging. It was a test. So I had to make test pass. That was the second one, I think. And for that one, I didn't know like any regex, which a lot of people go to, I feel like. I just tried to keep it as simple as possible. I was just the least amount of things I could do. Love it. And kept it super simple, finished in the time, and yeah, tricked them into thinking that I was a normal person. And then instead of offering me an internship, they decided to get me in as a junior. So yeah.
Yeah, I like to use Katie as an example in that she came in way better than we expected. We were expecting more of the intern role. And she came in and she knew what she was talking about. I don't know if she spent the night before cramming. That's what I did when I interviewed here. Like on the plane, I was trying to learn JavaScript, like ES2 2015. I was like, I don't know any of this. But she came in, and I will say attitude plays a lot into these in-person interviews or over the phone interviews or video interviews, especially these days in COVID. But having a personable attitude and smiling and interacting with the person that's interviewing you goes a long way. And Katie did that. She also nailed the tech part that I remember James and I, we were like, shoot, we were not expecting her to do that. And so we were like, well, let's send her to the next level. And
My heart was beating so fast the entire time. I'm like, please don't make me do another thing.
and I know that every company has different hiring practices, and not everyone is Katie, unfortunately. So everyone is going to have a little bit different experience. But from Katie's example, I can say, be personable, know the details of the framework and the language that you're going to be using at the company, so that when they put something in front of you that you're not expecting, you can at least, as she said, do the simplest thing possible to get things to pass. That test, a lot of people do reach for regular expressions, which can really complicate things, but it could also make the test pass very quickly if you know what you're doing. But it also, when you are working on a large legacy app, a lot of times the stupid, simple thing is a lot better than the complex, clever thing, because inevitably, 6 months from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, you're gonna have to come back to that code and be like, what the heck does this do? And if it's simple, then you're going to understand what it does. If it's complex, you're going to have to look through Git comments and PRs, trying to figure out what the heck the person was thinking when they were doing that. So thanks for sharing that, Katie. Hopefully that helps someone out there who's like, I don't know how to get in, because she got in and she got in well. And ground run.
Yeah, I just want to. Sorry, I just wanted to harp on the I guess keep it simple and think about the next person that's coming, because that brings me back to my experience as a new grad, jumping into this embedded crazy software code base for the government, which I'd never done anything that real before. I think our part alone was like 1.3-ish million lines of code, and the whole plane was more, a multiple of that. There was a lot of that kind of, somebody wrote the really cool regex that didn't write a comment or any documentation or anything. And it's like, hey, it's been there for 10 years and new guy, we need you to change it, but don't break anything else. So please think of the person that's coming after you, because that code you're writing, it will be there in 10 years and somebody's got to maintain it.
That's scary. That wasn't the targeting software, was it?
So I worked on I worked on what they called the CNI system, which stood for communication, navigation, and friend or foe identification. So it was like voice, data links, that kind of stuff. So the friend or foe part, yeah, that could get you shot by a missile, but I didn't work on the weapon systems.
I would say that ties in well with the portfolio thing too, and that if you are making portfolio sites and you're open sourcing those for potential employers to take a look at, do the simple thing. I wouldn't try to impress them too much. If it's a working app, it's a money making app or potentially money making app. If it's a clever app that doesn't work, then why bother? So a simple one that works is better than a clever one that doesn't.
And that's true during an interview too. Yep. Like the people who reach for clever, like we're gonna see you reach for clever. We're not gonna see that as impressive. It's seen as maybe ego, like I want to be the only one who knows how this works, or I know all these things. When what we're really testing for is how well are you going to work with our team? How well are you going to be among your peers?
Yeah.
Another thing
comes down.
I was going to say, another thing to add too, if you've never worked in the software industry before, one major problem that you may not also understand is that on top of the technical stuff that you need to know, there are well-defined industry processes that we follow that you may not also know. And that is another area that you should look into. You absolutely need to know how version control works. Like go deep in Git, right? You need to understand kind of how the process that we follow to write software. We don't just go into a room and spend 2 weeks in there and come out and be like, I have the feature, right? Like it's not how it works, right? And that's another thing I see that a lot of juniors are at a real disadvantage. Now, generally, companies will know, hey, someone who's never worked on a professional software team before isn't going to know this stuff, and hopefully they'll be cool with it. But unfortunately, I think right now, particularly in the COVID times, companies are looking for mids. They're looking for seniors. They're not looking for juniors, which is a shame on us. Like, our industry is really letting down the next generation of developers, and I hate that. But that's reality. Everybody's money's tight, and they want people that know how to like get started on day one and start being productive. If you want to be that person who can be productive, you have to not only learn your language or your framework, you also have to get a little bit of agile, how that works, code reviews. You understand how like the PR process works in GitHub. You're gonna have to learn those procedural things. And there's not really, I don't know if there's a really great resource for getting you started on that stuff. So that's just another thing that you have to worry about.
I feel like contributing to the open source community can give you some practice doing some of those things, working with others, how to get your PR approved, things like that.
And even if it's just like you looked at Laravel and you found a typo in the docs, right? Like,
Yes.
I know specifically for like Django, like they really, really want those kind of first-time contributions. And I assume most other open source communities are the same. And updating a doc, well, you'll still need to use Git. You'll still need to go through a code review that, you know, you'll kind of get to go through the motions, even if you're not changing code per se.
Yeah, it's a great point.
That's a really good tip. Leanne, if someone's looking, like, I know that people are scared a lot of times to jump into a project that has, 1,000 contributors that everyone's going to see their code. Is there anything in particular you'd recommend if someone's like, well, I do want to try something in open source? What's the best way to do that as a completely new person?
Oh, that's a good question. I think like Brian said, even if it's something small, pick something small that you can get an easy win in for your first contribution. I'd say if it's a typo, something that just kind of gets you over that initial fear of doing it for the first time. So something small, something you know how to do. Keep the scope tight, and
Yeah, cool. I
that's
do know
what I
that.
would
Yeah,
suggest.
a lot of the bigger projects have really good like
I was just
first
about to
time
say that.
contributor docs. Like for example, I did the one-line typo PR to GitLab, I don't know, a month ago because I was looking up on some new feature they had just released, and I was reading the docs. I'm like, that's not right. And they have a link right on the docs that said, find a problem, click this, and it's got a whole template for you to fill out of what you found, how you so like a lot of these larger projects have really good first-time contributor docs, and they have a community that's willing to like help you get there,
Yeah.
whether it's through like Slack or IRC or Discord. So
And
Yeah,
to
you
jump
will
on that-
occasionally. I was gonna say, you will occasionally come across someone who has an ego, who is kind of mean. But I would say those are the minority of the people out there. Most people are willing to help you get started and realize that, hey, if you're a first-time contributor to this project, you may need a little hand-holding to get through the thing. But hopefully they understand that if your experience is good by contributing to their repo, then you're going to want to keep doing it. And so hopefully they're going to try to get someone in there that's going to be almost like a coworker for them for a while.
Yeah, I just want to add two things, like two major benefits of contributing to open source, even if it's small. First, right, like your employer is going to see that and they're going to like, whoa, this guy is contributing to open source, right? Like that's huge. Now imagine you did like some doc improvements of React. Now you're a React contributor, right? Like you'll get the little logo on GitHub and all that stuff. Then you'll be like, yeah, I contributed to React. No big deal, guys, right?
You're looking at the guy who wrote the documentation for React. Thank
That's
you.
true, right? That's huge, right? I'm actually reminded of the story of, I think he's the lead maintainer now of React Redux. It's not Dan Abramoff. It's the other guy who did the Redux toolkit. But he started on Redux, like he just didn't understand it. And so he started contributing on docs. And then he's just got more involved into the community. And now he's like the primary contributor. And if you don't think that's a major like resume booster right there, I mean, yeah. So,
All right, let's hit this question from James. He says, I upgraded my legacy skills, then COVID hit, and it looks like everything will go into the cloud. As a full stack who probably has to know DevOps, what's the most important skill going forward?
Kubernetes. Throw it out there because I know the AWS guys are going to be like, what? I think I do a lot of DevOps. I know that other people on the panel do DevOps. But I will say that like yes, modern DevOps is important. I don't know that you have to have DevOps skills to be a contributor. In fact, I think that we're now seeing a pretty good formation of like an infrastructure level, like developer tier, and then even like a platform development tier where people focus on like stuff on top of like Kubernetes or whatever, and then you have your app developers. So we're seeing kind of this nice kind of stratification of the skill set. But I think that like in general, you should know how like modern server development works if you're working on the back end. Like you should know the 12-factor app and what the pieces are. You should understand the Linux process model, because really like everything else like Docker, Kubernetes, it's all built on that. So you need to have those core skills. You need to understand how to use the command line and be proficient in it. So, and then like pick your cloud after that, because they're all different.
Yeah. I know at Planning Center, full stack isn't as full as some other places. As a developer, most of my day is spent on Ruby in the back end and React on the front end. And we have a whole team that handles all the server stuff. And so while it's nice to know what's going on back there, and I follow some of the repos and see James putting some PRs in there, and I don't always look at them, but I know that, in the comments, he's making one change or another. I guess that being said, I would echo that you may not have to know some of those details if what you want is a developer position. I personally went through a Docker course on Udemy. I actually really enjoyed it. And I have a lot of side projects that I do just for fun and keep learning. And I've ended up putting them all in Docker and putting them on, shared hosting things in my Docker containers, and just learning that and having my own Docker Hub account and things like that are helping me continue to learn things that I don't necessarily know everything about, but want to expand my knowledge on the deeper level, to know if I'm hosting my own thing, then I'm going to have to figure out when it breaks, what's broken and why it's not working. So I do think that it is important. It can be important, but may not be as important as it used to be. James, do you have anything to add to that one? I know that's kind of up your wheelhouse.
Yeah, I would concur. Once Planning Center hit the 50 headcount territory, is when we started having a dedicated platform infrastructure team and full stack. I mean, even before that, like there was an ops guy for a long time.
Yeah.
But I mean, for the last 10 years of hiring a Planning Center, hiring a full stack developer did not include the infrastructure side of things.
Yeah.
I don't mean to override or to interrupt again, but if you are interested in full stack development, or not full stack, in DevOps and and doing full stack, you're really great in a small team. Like if you want to do like actual startups, like early stage startups, it's an excellent skill to have. But I just want to like point out to the younger developers that are getting into the industry, don't focus on that. Please do not focus on that. Spend your time in programming and learning like basics. But if you are a mid and you are comfortable in Linux, I don't think you're going to find that like Kubernetes and Docker and all that stuff is particularly hard. And it is a really great skill to develop. It'll make you hugely in demand. So if you really want to continue on to working like in some of the FANG companies, FANG meaning like Facebook, Amazon, Apple, whatever, those skills really do kind of transfer.
Richard, coming back to you, something you mentioned in your introduction. I know that when I first got started in the industry looking for a job, one of the things I was scared about was joining a company that would go under. And I would, put all my effort into this startup or whatever that 6 months later was gone and I had nothing to show for it. And I was looking for another job. And then I'm very interested to hear your perspective on that, having gone through that.
Yeah. First time, scary as hell. I'm not going to lie. But honestly, I think everybody, and I know like people have different like levels of financial security and like the security that they need for the family, but I feel like every developer should at least have a close scare in going under. And I say this because one of the biggest things that I learned in working in failing startups is how important it is to deliver features, to not gold plate, to not wait to deliver something, to like, you have to get stuff out there, because I think we tend to get divorced from the business a lot. Like, we tend to get separated and not understand what we're doing actually drives the revenue of the business. And then another thing to say is, it's really important that your business is making money. That sounds completely stupid, but as a developer, we forget that, right? Especially in like Silicon Valley startups where you have a long runway and you've got, a Series A or Series B investment, right? So a lot of the companies that I was with, they were Series A or Series B, ran out of the runway, didn't have any customers, didn't have a good MVP that actually like found a product, like a fit in the market. And that's incredibly important because you're building products for customers. So like anytime like I see jobs for like an R&D position or whatever, I pass them up, because I'm like, if I'm not delivering something that's going to be in the hand of a customer, I know that that's a company that may not have a healthy business process. So the one thing I would say in terms of if you're a developer and you're worried about risk is, first of all, like we're actually set up pretty well. Like a lot of times you're going to have like a 401k in a company, like you'll have stock options, and I've never seen any of my options pay out. So that's one thing to say is like, it's nice if they pay out eventually, but honestly, they've never have for me. But like, you typically will have like a 401k, and those will roll over from company to company. So you're not like losing your retirement. So look for companies that do have a 401k, right? Like find these paths toward like building your nest egg. If you really love a company that's an early stage startup and it doesn't have a 401k, but you're like, this is the next big thing, get yourself a mutual fund, right? Like, do the investments yourself. So I think the key here is, first, protect yourself as much as possible. Have savings, make sure that you're investing in your retirement fund, and then you can take some of those risks. Another thing to say is, and this goes back to the kind of the travesty of where we're at right now with COVID, is that while there is a lot of like junior positions that are not there anymore, right? Like, people have like cut a lot of the lower positions. I honestly would say I've never had more job offers in my life, because everybody is remote and because every company is a software company. And so if you invest in your skills, you have to invest in your skills. If you invest and you're good at your job, there will be other offers. And another thing too is, you're going to meet people like Gio and everybody, and you're going to build a network. And I would say that the last couple companies that I worked for is I didn't interview because I was hired by a friend, right? And that's another thing is networking's important. So you're doing one key piece here by participating in Full Stack, right? Like, being a part of a meetup is like networking. But like I said, invest in your own skills. Make sure you have your own retirement stuff set aside that's independent of the company, and you can ride a startup into the ground, because you can get a job within like 2 weeks. So I know that was long, but yeah.
No, that was perfect. So if someone, like you mentioned, people are coming to you and wanting you, how do you go from like dying to work for anyone, like Katie said, you'd pay to work for this place, to having them come to you? Like, what are some things that people are looking for, who are hiring, who are looking for these people? How are they finding you? And this is for everybody.
Yeah. I'm going to let someone else answer.
Well, I'll just throw out.
All right.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Oh.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, I mean, obviously being able to tag, some level of years of experience is, they're with, like Rich said, they're looking for mids or higher. So they see that number, and they see their, the kind of keywords of the technologies you've used. And like for me, I get pinged a lot on LinkedIn because they're like, oh, you do AWS and Python and stuff. So, having an active profile on there with, up-to-date information about the stuff you've done. A lot of recruiters are trawling through there. You got to be careful though. There'll be some low-quality ones. So, don't believe everybody that reach out to you is actually, trying to recruit for something. So But that, the user experience is the part I always get stuck on, because that doesn't really help the new people, like Rich said. So if there's a way for you to kind of take, any side projects you've done, any open source contributions you've done, and kind of package that into your experience and kind of be able to spin a narrative. I don't mean spin, but like be able to write a narrative that kind of leads towards the job or the position you want. And I feel like you truly have to believe that story yourself, because if you don't believe it yourself, you're not going to come off as confident when somebody asks you, so tell me about this project you've written about, in your experience here. But if you can actually, tell a story and say, yeah, I got into programming because I thought, I heard Richard Clayton's talk about diagrams, and through that I learned about software engineering and I really wanted to get into it. And here's the projects I've done related to that. And you truly believe it, interviewers will notice. But you also got to realize that, there's some odd billion people on this earth. Not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody's going to like to hear what you have to say. So never stop looking for the next position, because you have to close so many doors for the right ones to open. And there will be a lot of doors shut in your face, and you just have to keep going and not get discouraged.
Yeah, consider them practice when they do get shut, because even interview practice, the only ones that are actually really good practice are the real ones. Unfortunately, like, you can have your friends pick your brain, but the reality is they just don't know the subject. Like, there's just no way that they know the subject matter enough to actually grill you on what you're going to get in that room.
I knew one guy who was perfectly happy at his job and wasn't planning on leaving at all, but he would make it a practice to go on a real interview every year or so. And as an interviewer like that, I hate
incredible.
that. But the reality is, even the planning center, like tomorrow, it could be gone. You just don't know. And so to keep those skills up and alive, it could be helpful. I haven't done that, but he made my mind think, like, well, shoot, what if something does happen? What if I do need that skill tomorrow? So anyway, I guess that's something to consider.
Yeah. You are your own job security, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's employment at will. I could get laid off tomorrow with no recourse, right? So my only job security is being able to go out in the market and find a job, right? So you have to keep those skills. You got to keep in tune with what's going on in your local job market, or since COVID, everything's remote, kind of keep in tune with what's going on in the area you want to get into, because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. But going back to the getting people to notice you question, I think one thing that I really like to push people to do is do side projects, because then you can say, I've gone from idea to execution here, and this is what I have to present. If that's something that you can link to from LinkedIn or anything like that, you can say, I created this all by myself or with a friend, and my name's on it on the footer. This was created with love by Jeffrey Lessel. Like, there's a guy, I went to RubyConf today, and they had a kind of a in-between session, kind of fun hallway track thing. And he made an app that we all kind of interacted on just for RubyConf. And down the bottom, made with love, RubyConf by blah, 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 blah. It's those types of things that if you put them out there and you put enough of them out there, then eventually someone's going to see them and be like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, that's a great idea. We could probably use someone like that on our team. And I'm not saying they're going to come knock down your door or anything, but it's certainly going to be helpful when you say, I've done that. I've shipped this. It is live. You can go to it, you can use it, and it provides someone in the universe some use, even if it's just you. Like, a lot of my side projects are, I see something, even if it already exists, it doesn't do exactly what I want it to do, or I think I can do one little thing better. But even just the process of thinking through, well, what's it take to get to even where that was, will help. It helps me to, again, start designing other things better. And I believe it'll help a junior as well to start thinking through that whole process of some of that depth. Side projects, do them.
You are a brand. You really are a brand.
That's true.
You need to promote yourself, honestly. Get a blog. Here's another thing too. I love it when people write about failures. Like, hey, I did this and I completely failed, because it shows the level of maturity. Like, hey, I'm not perfect and I tried something hard and I failed. I think people are looking for honesty. We're looking for someone who is a self-starter, who is self-motivated to learn, like a lifelong learner, because that's the skill that we all have. The reality is we may all know Node right now, but 6 years ago, most of us weren't programming in Node, right? So like you're hiring a person who has the capacity to learn. And that's what, like, I think a lot of the senior developers or hiring managers are looking for, is someone who can learn on the job. So yeah, you have to show us that. Show it like in any means possible, right? Blog, be a speaker at a conference, do something like that.
I'm sure there's people that are, when someone is passionate about a job they're doing. It's like, even if it's like bagging groceries, you're like, that person loves their job, and you love that. You're attracted to that. You are drawn towards that. So if you can demonstrate that you love programming, then it's going to be attractive. You're going to be attractive to the people who are looking for programmers.
And this is a field of passionate people. Like, we all love to program. So if you don't like to program, I once interviewed a guy and I asked him, what's the thing that excites you the most? And he said motorcycles. And I was like, what? Like, why are you doing that? Didn't hire the guy because I was like, he's going to go home and work on his motorcycle, and that's fine. But like, that's not what I'm looking for.
James, I saw you unmute, and I think I know what you're going to say. I'd love to hear you say it.
So we're right in the middle of a hiring round at Planning Center right now. And just today, we disqualified a batch of candidates, and none of them. So first, we're looking for junior developers. And none of the candidates today, first, all of the candidates today had roughly the same programming skills. The ones who made it to the next round was 100% their written communication. And especially now in the COVID world, written communication is everything. This is how you communicate with your team, whether it's on Slack or in long form on Basecamp or whatever, Jira. The ability to write and communicate effectively is paramount. Like, it is, especially at a junior level, it is near equal to your existing programming skills, because if you can communicate, we can communicate back to you and build you up and train you up. And without that, sometimes it comes down to such dumb stuff too, spelling errors and stuff like that. It just kind of turns you off to this candidate, and you say, well, I'm going to set this one aside because this one is just fine.
Can I ask a question? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna say, when you're looking at these candidates, are you looking for ninja code warriors that like go off on their own and like can do everything by themselves?
Not even once. Not even once. I mean, we are, like I said, we're going after junior, like this round in particular. We're going after junior candidates. We're knowingly getting in with these people who have little or no experience and are totally on board with that. But we need to be able to talk to you. We need to enjoy talking to you. We're going to be working together for potentially a really long time, and we're not willing to take the chance on the unknowns, particularly in with communication.
That's one thing I was trying to get at, is like soft skills and the ability to work in a team as a teammate. Huge. I would rather take someone less skilled that's going to be a team player than someone who is one of those proverbial like ninjas and can do everything but like won't communicate on a team. Like, that's absolutely huge. I actually love to hire older developers, right? Like people who are like second career, like decided they want to get into programming because they know how to be professional in office. Like, there's these myths that we have in this industry where like, hey, we're all like wearing, hoodies and we're unprofessional. Absolutely not true. We want professional people who show up and are reliable and work on a team. Like, that's what we want.
Yeah.
That's a great point. My company is also going through another round of hiring, and we are looking for junior developers. And one thing that always kind of amazes me that people slip up on in the interview process is their time management. Sending an email to our operations manager at 3 a.m, not showing good time management. Being late for your interview, not good time management. You need to show that you can. That's a soft skill. If you need to reply to a coworker, you need to get something to a client, it needs to be in a timely manner, and something that everybody notices during the interview process.
Yeah, for sure. Two things I wanted to add. I'll pick up on something Richard said earlier that I thought James was picking up on. I really appreciated James' response. And this kind of goes along with James' response, but it's not exactly what I thought he was going to say. Historically, we've had a question on our interview of, tell us about the biggest mistake you've ever made. And we can tell when people are trying to, like, we want to know, like, what's your biggest mistake and what did you learn from it? And if you can't tell us a single mistake you made, then you obviously didn't learn from it. And so that makes it harder for us to be like, well, join our team, let's have you make this mistakes that you're going to make because you're human, and make them on our team and never learn from them. So be honest in interviews. Like, we want to know your mistake. You can go, I would say, be honest, but also make sure that you go with the, at the end, these are the things I took from it and I've learned from it, and not just be like, I screwed this thing up and boy, was it a mess, period, end of discussion. So what did you learn from that? The second thing goes along with the communication part. Another thing we do is we do kind of a live coding exercise over a video, and we control the keyboard, and the interviewee has to tell us what to type and how to overcome this problem. And that, I think, helps bring out a little bit of those communication skills. This is verbal communication rather than written communication, but it helps us to understand the way you're thinking and how you can generate the words from your thoughts, and tell a teammate who you may be pairing with in 3 months how to solve a problem well, or a new way of solving this issue that he hadn't thought of before. So I agree with those things, that communication is important, both written and verbal. Time management, huge. We've had people show up late for interviews, like on-site interviews. And we're like, where's this person? We flew them all the way out here and they're not even going to show up on time. That's not cool. Be where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there. Obviously there's, circumstances you can't control, but if that happens, communicate, say like, man, I'm stuck in the car in traffic. Let us know that things happen, but do your best to be on time. All right. So if you guys don't mind, let's move on a little bit to higher levels. Let's go back to the question that Lanny asked earlier. As a new tech lead, how would you approach and mentor intermediate devs?
So I don't know about how everybody else does it, but I find there's a lot of chance for kind of shared learning over either pairing on a problem with a junior dev, or going through rounds of code review on their thing. And the goal is not to say you screwed this up, right? You should have done it like this. The goal is to kind of lead towards, hey, I see you did it like this, but here's a link to the docs of, the more common idiom that's used. Here's why, I think it might be better here. What do you think? Right? And you kind of do like a conversational, lead them through, like, maybe they had no idea this thing existed. And I found that actually been pretty successful when I've worked with more junior people, because they're like, oh, this is really cool. I didn't know about this. So thank you so much for showing me. And, sometimes there's people aren't like that, but most of the people I've worked with, they just needed to be pointed at, here's the really cool thing you didn't know about. And then they're like really eager to learn, and, just love that you're giving them the feedback of stuff they can pick up on that they didn't know existed. Has everybody else kind of had that same thing? Or
I would say one thing we learned on my team is to treat, especially in pull requests in the communication parts, treat a new person differently than you would treat a person who's been on your team for a long time. So we've had two examples where one, I think we may have done it wrong, and one where I think we're doing it right. In that, in the early days on our team, there's so much that the person doesn't know. They don't even know what they don't know. We don't know what they don't know. And so things that are kind of nitpicky, or that can be seen as nitpicky, we leave them out. So it may not conform to our style of code, or it may be a little bit less eloquent or maybe heavy-handed or things like that. That as long as it's secure and it works and it has a test behind it, then it's probably going to make it in if you're a junior. There may be a PR coming soon after that brings it up to more of a higher standard. But we don't take the time to mention those little things until they're maybe 6 months to a year in. And then we start turning the corner and be like, okay, now we know we have a basis of trust. You trust us, we trust you. We know that you're not going to make dumb mistakes. You know from us that we're not going to nitpick your code just because we hate you. We're trying to help you get better. So let's start steering you into, now you've got the code working. Let's make it prettier or better or more performant or things like that. So that we cover the bases first, and then we start to lead them a little more towards the making them better, quote unquote better. I know that's a loaded word, but I found that that's worked really well on our team at Planning Center.
And what really inspired me was that I read this blog called How to Do Code Reviews Like a Human. And there's a couple parts to it. If you haven't read it, I recommend doing it. Because it even talks about, because you're on a written medium, right? Like in a pull request, your words matter. So it's not, you should change. It's like, I think that this would be better this way because of X, right? So you're not accusing the person who wrote the code of like they did something wrong. You're more providing a neutral suggestion of like, hey, I think this would be better this way, and provide helpful, code snippets and documentation and that kind of thing. Because if you haven't been in this industry for a long time and you're fairly new, you might take it personally, right? Like, oh, he's assaulting my code. I don't feel good about this. So you got to be really careful when you're in those kind of situations.
Yeah, we've had situations where it all comes down to the linter was broken, in the person's editor. It's like, why would you write your code like that? It's so ugly, and this line is blah, 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 blah. And it's just, well, the linter was broken. So I fixed it, and now that thank you for mentioning it, because I would not have known that my linter was broken unless you brought this up in the PR. So there's some things like that too that they just didn't know.
I think this is a deeper question too, like, to be perfectly honest. Because I've done a lot of, like, I was chief engineer at my first company. I've done a lot of mentorship work, and I've gotten a chance to fail really badly at that. Like, I can say honestly that I have failed a lot, and it's given me some pretty good advice. But the first thing I would say is you have to have a culture of improvement. The whole company has to be built on a culture of exacting standards where you have agreed communally, like, this is what our code base is going to look like. If it's a linter, or if it's a special set of rules around testing or whatever, this is what it is, right? And then the person who has to follow it 110% of the time is the tech lead. The tech lead leads by example. That's why you're the lead, right? And one thing that I can tell you is I've noticed that when I've gotten into new teams and I was the tech lead, I wouldn't spend a ton of time code reviewing them right up front. I don't want to come in and criticize and do all that. What I do is I write code the way I think it should be. I'll refactor some of their stuff if it's touching like what I'm doing, but I write it and I do it in such a way where I'm like, this is, unless you are amazing, like, this is the best that I think this could possibly be, right? Like, from style to implementation to abstraction to everything. And then, like, I might even ask them to review my code, right? Knowing that, like, and this is not to sound like I'm trying to talk myself up, but knowing that the standard that I put on myself was much higher than what they put into their own code. And when they go to review it, they're going to see things and they'll be like, why did you do that? And those are opportunities for you to be like, oh, that's a great question. Like, it's because I'm following, solid principles. And then they're like, what's solid principles? Well, let's go into that. Let's talk about that. So you open up through your own work examples of where to point them to. Another sneaky thing I do is I will look at people's code. We don't actually do a ton of code reviews at PeachJar, but I will look at other people's code reviews and we'll do like classes, and we'll do like, hey, let's present on a topic or something like that. And what I'll do is I will stack the deck and I will somehow find a way to get them to take a class on a principle that I think they're violating, right? And so I'll like try to sneakily get them to read up on something and teach the rest of the group on something they're violating. And then they might like get a turnaround and be like, oh, like it's their own idea. Oh yeah, that's right. Like I need to do, dependency injection. So like there's a lot of sneaky things, but I think like people pointed out, you don't want to be combative, especially if you're a new tech lead into a group of like, intermediate devs. Because I think that like intermediate devs are kind of I hate to say it, they're like the level of experience where they're like on the hype curve of like where you think you are in progression. They're like at the top of like one of the like mountains, and they don't know that they're gonna hit a valley very soon and realize that they don't know shit. And then like they're gonna finally work their way back up to senior developer, and they'll be a lot more humble when they get to that point. So I think it's kind of tricky at that level. But like if you're like working with senior devs, I think it's a lot easier to be like, hey, like, why did you do it this way? Like, that doesn't make any sense, So.
As an intermediate dev, I thank you for checking my ego. I appreciate it. But one thing, so I don't have a direct answer to this question, but one thing I look for from my mentor is that we learn together, because when you learn, you connect what is new to your past experience. That's how you learn something new. And your past experience is much greater than mine. And through learning something new together, I get so much more out of it. And it also, I think, shows that you're standing with your team in that culture of improvement and professional development.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to say that you shouldn't work with you should absolutely pair as the tech lead. But I think that like, actually, as what Ryan said, it's a marathon. When you're teaching like juniors or intermediates, it's going to take a long time. There's a lot to process. You don't realize how much you've processed over the years. And like something that seems really evident to you at like a senior level may not be very evident to someone like lower. And a lot of times it's because you've been burnt multiple times on it, and they don't have that instinctual wisdom, and you're trying to impart that. So that's another thing. You have to give them space to fail. That's like another thing. Sometimes you just got to let them do something, and knowing that it's going to be a train wreck. And hopefully they learn from it, right?
I would say one thing, I believe we do a ton of things right at Planning Center, but I think one thing we've always struggled with is how to mentor correctly. And when Katie started, she and I worked together a lot together. And one thing I think I did well is we paired a lot, and she saw me fail a lot. And I think that hopefully helped her realize, it's okay if I fail. And Katie, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but I'm hoping this is what communicated. One is it was okay if she failed on her own. And two, she can see me overcome those failures and figure out what failed. And we talk a lot about mentorship in terms of like technical parts, but there's also some of that confidence part that I think can be missing in some of the how to mentor talks or books or blog posts. But there's also like we're all dealing with the syndrome where you can't, what is it?
Imposter?
Yes, imposter syndrome. Thank you. We're all dealing with imposter syndrome. We all think that we don't belong here. How did I sneak in to Planning Center? I've been here 6 years and still I'm like, when are they going to finally realize I don't belong here? We all go through that. And I think a part of mentoring can be some of that too, is like, look, you're here for a reason. You nailed your interview. We've worked together for 90 days now. You know what you're talking about. You're getting these concepts. You're seeing where we're coming from. So please, realize you're here, and we want you here, and we need you here. So I would say that can be helpful as well when you are the mentor.
As the mentee.
Yeah, I can't.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, I've had 2 mentors now here. They've both been very good at letting me fail. And they're not afraid of silence, which I really enjoy with my mentors, is because we'll be pairing a lot. And I'll be like, yeah, I think we should do it this way. And my new mentor who's on my team, he'll just be like, you do? Okay. And so I'll do it, and it'll fail. And he's like, okay, why? What happened? Let's read the error message. How about we do that? But yeah, my mentors have been very great at letting me fail, not penalizing me for it, and not being afraid of silence when I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. Ryan, what were you gonna say?
Sorry, I just wanted to jump in on the thing that you were talking about. That, like, when I started as a software engineer, I did not have any self-confidence, right? Like, I was quaking in my boots the whole time. I was like, I should not be here. This is crazy. How did they get to hire me? And I'd say it took me a good solid 3 years, but like, I have to thank the people I worked with, because they were constantly going, dude, no, like, you're good. You know what you're talking about. Like, you question, you're doing the good things. So like, the positivity that comes from a good mentor, kind of like helping you get over that self-confidence hump, like, will make a huge difference. And at least it did for me. So I would say, if you're mentoring somebody, like, being, not like paper over the mistakes, but like, when they do good, call it out. Be like, hey, that was really awesome. That thing you did, like, you did a solid principle, like, that you were messing up before, and you did it right. Like, good job, because that helps a lot.
Can I piggyback on that? Write your teammates LinkedIn, or they're not reviews, or what are they, like, when you like write
Recommendations.
Yes, right?
Yes.
Some recommendations. You will not believe how far that goes with someone, right? Because you took the time to not only show that you appreciate them and point out something they've done well, but you've also told the world it, right? And I think that's something we don't do enough as engineers, is we don't recognize the people that we've worked with, our peers, even our bosses, and that's like part of being a team lead, right? Like, is recognizing people and doing it publicly. And, funny enough, like in the Marine Corps, they have a really simple kind of philosophy around leadership. And it's only 2 principles: mission accomplishment and troop welfare. And basically means you have to do what you have to get done, right? Like, if you're in a company, you have to make money, right? But then you take care of your people. And that includes, like, as a tech lead, taking care of them on their way out of the company, right? Like, taking care of them, like finding them a good home if they got laid off, or if they're on their way out because they're looking for a new position, like, help, like, being the first person to say, I will write you a recommendation. I'll be your reference, right? And I think that shows that, like, you care about them, and it allows you to, like, in a safer place, provide I shouldn't say criticism, but a critique of their work without them thinking that you're attacking them, which I think tends to be kind of the hardest thing about, like, managing someone, is critiquing them, but doing it in a constructive way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Well, I told these 5 lovely panelists it would be about an hour. It's about an hour 22. So I would like to end on one question, kind of more of a, I guess, perspective, hopeful, optimistic question. And that is, what is missing or needed in tech today? And how would you go about solving that? Before we get to that, while you're thinking about that, Leanne Eddy asks, what's the company you work for? You mentioned you're hiring, and he wants to know if there's something applications. Plug it.
Yeah, they are. The company is called New Rocket, one word. I think the website is newrocket.com. And yeah, they're accepting applications for all engineering levels, people with ServiceNow experience. And if you don't know what the heck ServiceNow is, we will teach you. So not a problem.
On-the-job learning.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to the old Rocket?
I asked that in my interview and it didn't land.
The guy in the .com bubble. Oh man. Okay, so who has an answer for what is missing or needed in tech today?
Like, are we talking specifically the industry, or is that just open-ended? Like,
I'll leave that open-ended.
Okay.
I don't know what their initial question was about, but I'll leave it open-ended.
I have a response to that. One thing I've seen a lot is a really big lack of diversity. That's no secret to anybody here in tech. I've been fortunate to be at a company that really respects. Up until a couple of weeks ago, our dev team was 50% women, which was fantastic. Yeah, we maintained it for a long time, and I'm hoping we get back to that point. But women are still, and minority groups are still widely underrepresented in senior leadership and in senior positions as developers. So that's one thing that is definitely needed, because that's where the decisions are getting made. So.
Yep. You about to say something?
I'm still thinking. I'm mulling this one over here.
I've got an answer. I think. I'll answer while you guys are thinking still. So I was just at RubyConf, happened this week, ended this afternoon, and one of the things that I've come out with after a couple of the presentations was there's got to be some way for tech to do good, and we have a lot of companies that are out there to make money, which is fine. You know, we're in a capitalist society, and what you ever think about capitalism is fine, but that's where we are, and people make money, and you have to have money to live, and there's things out there that people need. So there's nothing inherently wrong with doing tech just to make money. But it's hard to think of technical solutions to some of the non-technical problems. And in some of the discussion we were having with some of my team who went to RailsConf with me, or sorry, RubyConf with me, like we don't even know where to start. You know, it's like we want to do something, but first of all, how do you find something to latch onto, and then how do you find the technical solution to that issue? So I know that's vague, and that there isn't an answer to the question of my question. But I would love to have more concrete ways, and maybe this is something where people just have ideas and want to throw them out, of solving non-technical problems that we have as a society with technical solutions.
I don't think we're going to solve that one, Gio.
It's tough. It's tough. I wish it was easy. I wish it was easy.
The answer there, I mean, like, obviously more tech, right? You just got to double down on tech.
Yeah, of course.
Just make the stack deeper, fuller stack.
I don't have an answer for you on that one, but I have an idea of my answer on what's missing in tech. I think that, like, you know, as Leanne pointed out, like, we have a diversity problem. I think just in general, we are a new industry with not a lot of standards, which that's great in some ways and bad in a lot of other ways. And as you're seeing with, like, actually what you're seeing with a lot of the engineering trades, including like mechanical engineering and electrical engineering, there's a major like gap between coming out of college or coming out of like being self-taught and getting into a job where you're going to be successful and like you're like going to start your career. And then like, so like we have this problem in the first half, just getting started. And then I think there's a real problem on the back half, which is like, once you've been an engineer for a long time, like a lot of times people are like, well, clearly your path is to management or to somewhere else, right? And we have like a back half problem, which is like some people just want to write code, right? They want to be tech leads or whatever for the rest of their career, and that should be okay. And we just haven't like solidified that. You know, like there's just we're a really immature industry, and we're lacking a lot of that maturity. And that's seen like across the board. I think one of the reasons why we have diversity issues is that like you get someone who's loud and boisterous like myself, and I overtalk like or seem more confident than like a female engineer who might have way more experience than me. And so when I go into an interview, I sound like I'm more confident than I might actually be compared to another candidate. And so, and part of that I see is the immaturity of the industry. How do you effectively evaluate a candidate without taking like their personality, right, into account or whatever? So we have a long ways to go. I would love to see us hit a point where we're kind of like law, right? Where there's like a bar or something, like, and you take some kind of certification or something like that. That I hope would like kind of level the playing field, would allow people who are more junior to enter, but I just don't know.
It's a good one. Anybody else have anything to add? It's a tough question. I liked it.
Yeah, I think Rich's answer is kind of along the lines I was thinking, but he's obviously thought about it more and fleshed it out more than I would have.
An equally problematic thing is iPhone cables. Why did they change? What was wrong? Like, why haven't we solved that problem? I don't need USB 4. I'm on USB 1.1 still. Like, come on.
Oh man. All right, cool. Well, let's wrap it up there then. Thank you so much, you guys, for joining us on this panel. Hopefully, you guys watching received something that you can take away from this to help you in your journey, whether that's for someone who's just starting to be interested in tech to, becoming a lead developer at your company. Hopefully that helps. One thing I wanted to mention is we are a community. So we're based in San Diego County, California, but obviously we're doing this online. So now it's everywhere. So feel free to join us in our Slack community. There are probably some very specific San Diego County things going on, but you're certainly welcome to join us and ask any questions you have between meetups. There's not a whole lot of traffic there right now, but that doesn't mean there can't be. So come in and ask your questions and join us. Apart from that, we also have a form that you can fill out that really helps us know the best way to serve you. We are trying to make these meetups the best that we can for you to provide value for you. That obviously you're not going to spend an hour and a half just listening to us talk about stuff if it doesn't provide value for you. So if you have ideas of future talks or future things we can discuss on Full Stack, I'd really love to hear them. And I've got a form that you can fill out that's going across the bottom of the string there. Just fill that out for us. And if you have something that you want to present on, like if you have an answer to these problems that we've discussed that need some solutions, come present on that solution. Or even if you have a company or have an idea that's just tech to make money, that's fine too. That stuff's cool. So let's come and talk to us. Present your ideas. Present something you've learned. One thing that I was going to mention, because Richard really touched on this, I think, in one of his answers, but one of the best ways to learn is to teach. And if you, I've spoken at a few conferences, and on more than half of those conferences, when I submitted my talk proposal, I didn't know the underlying technology of the thing I was going to present on. And nothing makes you learn it more than knowing in a month I have to present for 30 minutes on this topic, and I got to dig deep in it. And it was always beneficial. It wasn't always fun, but I will say it was always beneficial to go back and learn and deep dive into those topics that I knew I was going to present on. So if you want to learn something, send us a talk idea. We'd love to have you. We also want more faces on here, so more people could be represented. With that, I again want to thank Leanne and James and Katie and Richard and Ryan so much. I'm going to bring them back up here. There they are. Thank you so much, you guys. That was really enjoyable. Hopefully everyone out there learned something. I know I did. So see you next month. Bye.
See you, everybody.
Later.